Good evening and welcome to the 7th of December 2020 meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. My name is Councillor Giawan and I'm Chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording of it will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phone on silent if they have one near them. Councillors, please mute your microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce the feedback and background noise and also save bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. If you are a member of the committee, please leave your camera on. I'll first do a roll call to check all members who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm that you are connected. Councillor Barnes.
Which one?
Councillor John Barnes.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Mary Barnes.
Present.
Councillor Harmer.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Kirby Green. Councillor Mrs Kirby Green.
Present.
Councillor Madeley.
Present.
Present.
Councillor Norton.
Present.
And Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. And from our independent persons, Mrs Rose Durbin.
Present.
Thank you very much. Also joining us today, we have Robin Venard, Assistant Director Resources, Gary Angel, Audit Manager, Tony Baden, Finance Manager, Mark Adams, Customer Services Manager, Lisa Cooper, Democratic Services Manager and Monitoring Officer, Trevor Greenlee from Grant Thornton, and Darren Wells from Grant Thornton. The Democratic Services Officer Committee Clerk today is Julie Hollands. Members of the committee will be making decisions today for a named vote. Julie will call out each member in turn and they will either answer for, against or abstain. Members, please remember to turn your microphones again on at this point. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname in the chat facility. Please be aware that there can be a time delay of around 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen, and each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. Okay, so agenda item 1 is to resolve that the minutes of the last minute be confirmed as a correct record of the proceedings and will be signed by myself at a later date. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is apologies. Julie, if you could give us our apologies, please.
Yeah, so we have apologies from Sue Fellows, an independent person, and Jan Gray, independent person, and we also have apologies from Malcolm Johnston, the Chief Executive.
Lovely, thank you very much. Agenda item 3, regarding any additional agenda items, we don't have any. Agenda item 4, disclosures of interests. Members, please speak clearly if you have a personal and prejudicial, and say the agenda item that it refers to. Does anyone have any disclosures at this point?
Yes,
Councillor Farmer.
Agenda item 12, page 30, regarding the business grants. I've claimed a business grant and I have a business.
Thank you. Any others?
I probably ought to mention that I am on one of the parish councils mentioned under the Code of Conduct complaints monitoring. I shall have to act as mentor to one of my parish councillors. That's item 6.
Item 6, thank you. Anyone else? No, see if we can just reconfirm those at the start of the agenda, Councillor Harmer and Councillor Barnes, that would be useful. Thank you. Okie doke. So if we move on
we ought to be careful about that one, because we mustn't identify either the parish council or the person.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so our meeting is obviously in two parts, so standard followed by audit. So we'll kick off with standards part A. So agenda item number 5 is our local government and social care ombudsman complaints monitoring, and the report will be introduced by Mark Adams, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Members, so the report before you is an overview of the local government and social care ombudsman complaints that we've received from the 28th of May to the 13th of November. There is a very limited complement of complaints here, mainly because the suspension of complaint investigation by the Ombudsman. Normally we receive around 11 or 12 per half a year, sort of 24, 23 in total for the whole year. So this year we've actually only received 7, so there was 2 in June and then the 5 that are presented before you. And again, these were investigated, they were reviewed by the Ombudsman, where 1 wasn't upheld, so it was found in favour of the council, saying that they weren't at fault, and 4 weren't investigated, mainly because the complainant could either pursue other options, so they could look at court action, or there was appropriate body to raise the complaint to, or the complaints wouldn't be value for money in terms of time to investigate. So happy to answer any questions in relation to the Ombudsman complaints that are before you. I can then move on to the normal complaints, I suppose, that we deal with prior to it being treated as before it goes, I suppose, to the Ombudsman side of things.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Barnes, please.
Chairman, I was slightly struck by the high proportion we treat as non-complaints, although I noticed some of them are because they are East Sussex County Council. Slightly more worrying was when I looked at the stage 2 complaints, the enormous proportion, admittedly of a not very large number, that are about enforcement. And I wondered if we could just say a little more about the trend in that area.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. We discussed that at the brief. So, Mark, I'm sure you can pick that one up.
Yes, happy to. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Barnes. I suppose the planning side, going to stage 2. This is a bit more of a formal complaint, so it's dealt with by the head of service. We often get very complex complaints from the planning side, mainly if a decision has been made and we have aggrieved neighbours that feel that whilst the planning decision has been granted, they feel very strongly against that decision, so they voice their concerns, often with a very lengthy complaint letter, and it can take a lot of time to investigate. Plus, I suppose throughout lockdown, that there have been more, I suppose, people indoors looking at waiting for an application to be processed, and I suppose there's people taking account of work.
Sorry, if I could interrupt, it's not so much on planning, it's the enforcement rather than the planning.
I suppose where there has been an increase in, I suppose, enforcement complaints, the trend is up by by a large percentage. I don't have the exact numbers, but we can provide them at a later date, Chairman. We're happy to do that. We can bring planning on board to collate those figures, but there has been a large volume of enforcement reports that are well above the normal that we have each year.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Harmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to echo Councillor Barnes' point. Actually, it is alarming, and I wonder if we've ever there's a way of calculating staff and officer time, and how often do people re-complain, so the same complaint revisits. Because I do understand, and it's probably a conversation we need to have in planning, but enforcement is a huge issue, and at some point this has got to be addressed head on. Otherwise, it's going to cause a problem throughout. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harman. Yes, it's something that I think is being reviewed at this stage in terms of the volume of enforcement complaints. And it's pure volume, I suppose, of work compared to the resource that's available. But we certainly can have a look at trends in terms of repeat complainants, and take that up, and that can be done outside of this meeting and shared. We can provide that to you, Chairman, and the rest of the committee.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Did you want to move on to your second part, Mark?
Yes. So thank you, Chairman. There was a lot of interest from members in relation to complaints that Robert deal with that don't get escalated to the Ombudsman. So I've provided some figures, covering the same period, so 28th of May this year to the 13th of November. So there was a total of 157. And you rightly pointed out, Councillor Bond, 111 were treated as non-complaints, 69 being department service requests, and others were non-Rother District Council matters. These were treated as non-complaints because departments often need time to be able to actually answer someone's query without it going direct to a complaint. So they will see if they can put it right first before someone gets to that complaint escalation standard. So that does involve working with the department, liaising with the customer, picking up the phone and engaging to see what can be addressed and put right. So 22 of these 157 were resolved at initial stage. So this is where, again, department managers receive a complaint and they're very proactive. So they pick up the phone, engage with that customer, discuss what the issues that they've been complained about, and look at how we can address things and move things forward without it going to an actual formal stage. And then further down the list, 3 were treated as stage 1 complaints. 9 then were treated as stage 2 complaints, and then we at this point we had 12 that were still under investigation. So I've provided just a summary of the area of complaints that for each department these come under in the pie charts before you. So that the first one you see is the initial stage and stage 1 complaints, and then the second pie chart is the stage 2 complaints. So during sort of, I suppose, the COVID pandemic, we did have to extend our complaint resolution response time to 40 working days from 20, and then I've just put an average. It's roughly taking around 23 days for us to receive a complaint and then respond. So in light of this, we are expecting more, I suppose, outcomes from the Ombudsman, mainly because of the pausing of their complaint investigation earlier in the year. So what we may see is an increased volume of Ombudsman complaints that are picked up in the June report. So that is definitely worth noting here, Chairman.
Great, thank you very much.
But yeah, happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, so we've got no pending questions in the chat. I just wanted to just say from a positive perspective, I think it's really good to see that the 5 ombudsman complaints came back, obviously without any wrongdoing from the council, which again, I think is testament to ROTHA standards in trying to get things right first time. The other point that I wanted to highlight is whilst some of the numbers look quite stark when you look at them on paper, but I think it's important to put the number of complaints into perspective when you compare it with the number of residents in ROTHA as well. So proportionately, the volume of complaints does appear to be very, very low overall. So I just wanted to add those in. We've got no other questions. This is a report for noting. Is everyone in agreement with the report for noting? Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so that concludes agenda item 5. Okay, so if we can now move on to agenda item number 6. So this is our Code of Conduct, Complaints Monitoring and Other Standards Matters. And if I can hand over to Lisa Cooper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Evening, members. Chairman, this report details the number of complaints received since the last meeting at which the committee considers complaints, as well as other standards-related matters. Since your last meeting, there have been 5 valid complaints against 3 district councillors and 2 parish councillors. One of the complaints against a district councillor has been referred for investigation and is not concluded, so has not been reported here tonight. The other 4 are detailed anonymously at Appendix 1. In November, I attended the annual standards conference with Rose Durban, which provided a useful update on standards matters, and I provide feedback on the emerging new model code of conduct given at this meeting in the following report. I can confirm that there's been no formal standards training since our last meeting, and I have yet to make contact with my neighbouring authorities to see whether there's an opportunity for a case swap for learning purposes in the new civic year, so I still need to be doing that. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on this report.
Great, thank you very much. Got no pending questions in the chat. We'll just give it a minute or so and see if we get anything through. No, so no questions on that one. Thank you very much, Lisa. So again, this is a report for noting. Everyone in agreement with the report for noting? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, that concludes number 6. Okay, if we can now move on to agenda item 7. So Local Government Association, New Model Code of Conduct, and again, introduced by Lisa.
Thank you, Chairman. As members may recall, this committee agreed the Council's response to the LGA's consultation on a new draft model code of conduct earlier this year. At that time, it was hoped that the new model code would have been available for consideration at this meeting. However, following consultation with the LGA's Councillor Forum in October, the LGA's board only considered the draft at their meeting on Thursday of last week. Therefore, it's too late for inclusion on this agenda, and clearly they haven't published the outcome yet. I will alert all members as soon as the new code is published, and I will bring a further report to the March meeting for consideration. At the Standards Conference I attended in November, the headlines emerging from the LGA consultation on the draft code was discussed, and these are detailed at paragraph 4 of your report. And I'll just highlight a few for you here. Obviously, the presentation of the new code should be clear and written in plain English. There is a preference for the term respect rather than civility, and we actually said courtesy and respect in our response, so that was good. It needs to be greater clarity over when a councillor is acting as a councillor and when they are acting in their private capacity. And I understand that this will be covered in guidance, which will be very helpful. The importance of social media and online meetings and how these are covered by the code. Some concern over using first person as opposed to third person, but from our response, we were keen to keep it as first person. So I understand that the LGA leadership are also keen to retain first person. And then just with regard to gifts and hospitality, the case was made to assume a presumption against the general acceptance of gifts, but where accepted, gifts above £50 in value should be declared. This is our current level, but I know in the past members have expressed concern about that being at that level. And then just to finalise, Chair, the new model code of conduct and accompanying guidance and working examples are awaited, and we will consider these as soon as we are able. Members are reminded that whatever new code is published, this council will be free to adopt it as is or to amend it as it sees fit. It would only be a model for us to amend as we wanted to, or retain our existing code. Obviously, that would be an option. So any questions, Chair?
Thank you very much for that summary, Lisa, and some great examples there of some extracts from the code. So thank you for that. We've got a question from Councillor John Barnes.
It's more a comment, Chairman, on the question. I don't mind losing the word civility. I was somewhat doubtful about it myself, but I would hate to bring the word respect in. That can be very misleading. Courtesy, yes, and politeness. But one can treat an individual with respect, but one may not treat his views with respect. So if we're going to actually take part in this debate or adjust our own code of conduct, I'd rather we use politeness or courtesy or one of those terms.
What's the matter with civility?
Mary, don't interrupt, please. I just think that respect is being abused now. I see the University of Cambridge is about to succumb to this, and there's a huge protest going on in Cambridge about it, because if shall we say, we had a member of the National Front, God forbid, on the council, I would want to treat his with the courtesy as being a fellow member, but I would certainly not want to respect the views he's putting forward. And so either we need to make a very clear distinction between the treatment of the individual and the treatment of the views, or we need to use a term that is much more neutral than respect. I think courtesy would do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can make a note of that. Councillor Thomas. Oh, you're on mute, Councillor Thomas.
My apologies. Just to say, I do see very much where Councillor Barnes is coming from there, because on a fundamental level, one would not necessarily respect a view which was denying the human rights of other people. On the other hand, I think what we're really trying to get at here is the manner of debate, and not wanting to go down to the kind of quality of debate that we've seen recently in the American elections. And so I think it's more a matter of the way in which you debate an issue. And you may not actually have anything but an attitude of contempt for a point of view. But I think it's very important the actual manner, the atmosphere of debate should be essentially respectful. And so I don't quite share the objection to the use of that term. But what I wanted to do actually was to make a different argument. And this was about this business of first person or third person. Because I think it's important to say that a code of conduct is not, as the LGA appears to be arguing, purely a matter for councillors. If it was, why would we have an independent person whose job it is to help us adjudicate on the code of conduct? It's a matter also for the public. The public can make use of the code of conduct if they're not happy with the way in which a particular councillor has behaved and they feel that councillor has been in some ways unprofessional. And so I think it's very important to say I would prefer the third person. I don't see why any councillor would have any difficulty in a phrase which goes councillors should. But I think from the point of view of the general public, they should be able to see something reflected in that way. And just finally, one of the ways in which Parliament operates is there is a kind of parliamentary code of conduct, and if somebody infringes that, a member of Parliament can be recalled by the public, and indeed can be removed as a member of Parliament. And so I think there's quite a precedent for actually regarding a code of conduct as something which is a public document and which gives the public rights. And so I disagree, just to make that point, with the LGA on this. Just for that to debate.
Thank you very much. Lisa, have you got any comments on those two at the moment?
All I would say, Chair, is obviously this will be a model code and we can amend it as we see fit. So members can decide, you know, if we go down the road of introducing a new code, what terminology you want to use and whether it's third person or first person. And that will be something that you as councillors will agree moving forward. So we can have that debate another time.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mary Barnes.
Thank you. I hadn't realised John was going to pick this one up because I'd actually marked it as well, this civility one. And I looked it up in the dictionary and it means conformity with normal conventions of politeness. I don't have a problem myself with the word civility, and it has a meaning all of its own. There's a sort of nuance about civility, which I think we ought to be keeping. And so I feel very strongly that we should just keep that in.
Okay, thank you. So as Lisa said, I think this will probably be a conversation later on down the line once the code has been adopted, or, you know, once we decide to adopt the code, we can then start looking at, you know, tweaking it, I suppose, to suit our purpose. Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we've got no further questions on this one. So if I could have, so this one is to be resolved that the report be noted, but a further report be submitted to the March meeting with regards to the possible code.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. So this is one that are we voting on this one, Julie?
Chairman, I think as long as everybody's happy, because obviously it's a report for noting and everyone's noted that we're obviously going to be having a fuller report at the next meeting, then I don't think we need to do recorded vote. So if everybody's just happy that, you know, they nod to say that they're happy, that's fine.
Yeah. Lots of nods. Brilliant. Thank you very much. OK, that concludes agenda item 7. So if we can now move on to agenda item number 8. So this is our independent persons recruitment. And once again, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the proposed process for recruiting 2 new independent persons to assist the council in the consideration of complaints against elected members. The term of office for 2 of our existing IPs will expire in July next year. That's Jan Gray and Sue Fellows. Each will have served 2 4-year terms, and so they won't be eligible to reapply either. But it's proposed to advertise in January, interview in February, and make a recommendation to the committee in March. The role profile and person specification is attached to appendices A and B for information, and they are basically the same what we used last year. It's proposed that the interview panel comprises the chairman of the committee, the chief executive and myself. Paragraph 7 sets out the minimum requirements that the council must follow in terms of filling the vacancies with effect from July. Full council will be required to approve the appointments at the annual council meeting in May. During the recruitment process held last year, we had a number of excellent candidates who were interviewed, and these will also be contacted to see whether they are still interested in the position. Whilst this seems a little early to kick off this process, this will enable the recruitment to be completed by April and May, when I will be otherwise engaged in election work, and also enable me to induct the new IPs ahead of Sue and Jan leaving in July, so they can sort of hit the ground running with Rose. So it's not just Rose on her own. Thank you, Chair. So any questions?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's definitely the right thing to do in terms of our timescales. And I know during our previous discussion, we chatted around the kind of recruitment process, I suppose, for the existing people that weren't successful this time round. and whether or not we could adopt a more streamlined process for those individuals so that they don't have to go through the whole recruitment process and interview thing again, having already done some stages. So I know that's obviously something that we will look at further down the line, depending on what candidates we get from the advertisements in the first place.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor John Barnes, please.
I was very happy with most of this, but the reason we appointed a third person was because two people were coming to an end, and clearly it's useful that we've now achieved a degree of stagger, so there's always overlap. I'm not quite sure what the benefits are of recruiting a further two at this point. The workload is not huge. I just wondered whether it wouldn't be more sensible simply to recruit one more at this stage. Then if we feel need a third later, again, we achieve a stagger by delay.
Thank you. Yeah, good point. Lisa, any comments on that one?
I mean, we originally increased the number to 3 because I think we felt we needed that resilience. But again, you know, it's a member decision. If you think 2 is sufficient, I mean, you're absolutely right. We're not inundated with complaints. So I'm sure 2 would be sufficient. But we've had 3 for a little while. So I was just following the norm that we have. But as a member, you know, if members want only to recruit 1 further, then we can see where we can go from there. I don't know whether Rose would have a comment on that. Yeah, whatever, you know, whatever members decide. I don't think 2 would be an issue, put it that way.
Great, thank you. Rose, did you want to make a comment?
If I may, Chair, I think the workload isn't too arduous. It's dead interesting, but I think 2 would be reasonable, and I think that notion of a phased approach is quite sensible if that's members' decision. I think the important bit is that Lisa and colleagues have more than one person to bounce ideas off. I think that's the really critical bit, so that you get more than one perspective. I think that's really important.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Councillor Thomas.
Just to raise one other matter, I see at the bottom under other implications, we've got a no for equalities and diversity, where I just want to say, if we're going to have people as independent members of the panel, then maybe it does have an equalities and diversity dimension to it, and maybe we should take that into account alongside all the other factors. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we want to propose do we want to make an amendment to this proposal at this point in terms of the number? Because obviously the report is to clearly propose the recruitment of 2 independent persons for a term.
I will move that as an amendment at the moment. We can always come back if we feel the need for a third and appoint, and that way we achieve the stagger that I believe to be essential. So I will move that as an amendment. Okay,
I'm really comfortable with that. Any other comments from anyone before, just on that element?
It's on that I would like to see some reference here to the fact the equality and diversity angle should be considered. It should be considered in everything the council does, including this. So I'd like to sort of have that added in as an amendment, please, if the committee agrees.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm comfortable with that. I think, yeah, you know, it's part and parcel of recruitment. But I think if you feel more comfortable having it documented, then I'm comfortable with that as well. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. So if I could have a proposer and a seconder, please.
I will propose as amended.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, Julie, if we could go to a roll call.
Okay, members, I'll call your names out in alphabetical order. You need to say for, against or abstain. Councillor John Barnes.
For.
Councillor Mrs Barnes.
4.
Councillor Harmer.
4.
Councillor Giawan.
4.
Councillor Mrs Kirby-Green. Councillor Mrs Kirby-Green. Councillor Madeley.
4.
Councillor Norton.
4.
And Councillor Thomas.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That is carried. Okay, so that concludes the end of our standards element. Rose, thank you very much for your contribution. So if we could ask you to leave the meeting. However, if you'd like to continue to follow the next part, it is available on our YouTube. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so if we move on to part B, so that is our audit section of the meeting. So if I can refer you to agenda item number 9, which is the audit findings for Rother District Council, and that is to be presented by Grant Thornton, and we have representatives Trevor Greenlee and Darren Wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to say a few words to set the report into context. The audit has taken longer than normal, and I think that's not unique to Rother. That's an experience across the country. We've substantially completed our work, and we're at the final stages of quality review. And there's a few key areas that we have to complete testing, but I don't envisage that they're going to identify anything significant. The audit has taken longer largely because of working remotely. That's placed additional requirements on audit teams to satisfy auditing standards. It's placed greater emphasis on challenging information that's provided by the council as being authentic, complete, and accurate. But that was recognised by the government in extending the November deadline. Where we stand currently, if we look across the country, there was an article in the trade press today, and delivery of audits by the end of November is running about 45% have been completed by the 30th of November. So the fact that we haven't achieved the end of November is not seen as a complete failure in the process. The COVID-19 environment has also affected the disclosures in the financial statements. So we paid greater attention to disclosures, to the consideration of whether assets have been impaired. And one aspect that features quite strongly in the audit findings report on your agenda is the impact around valuation of property, plant and equipment, and all property, so your share of property assets as recognised through the pension fund, and that and underpins or offsets the pension fund liability. Professional valuers carried out valuations but acknowledged the uncertainty caused by the pandemic, and when they gave valuations, they said that it was in a context of a material uncertainty because the market was so volatile. That disclosure has been appropriately reflected in the statement of accounts, and we have then referred to that in our audit report. So we draw readers' attention to that. It doesn't represent a qualification, but it does just highlight that issue to the reader of accounts. In audit plans that we've presented to you before, we've highlighted the need for greater scrutiny of property, plant and equipment and pensions liability because they are complex judgments and estimates. And we have, over the last 2 years, spent more audit time looking at those two areas. And we highlighted an error around the valuation of the Bexhill Leisure Centre and the Bexhill Leisure Pool, and we set that out on page 26 of the papers. That plus another error meant that overall the accounts weren't materially misstated. And at this point, in the statements before you, management haven't reflected those changes on the basis of materiality. I'm quite happy to confirm that it's not a material matter, and the very fact that the accounts haven't been adjusted for these wouldn't impact on the audit opinion. What we do through the rest of the report is highlight our findings against those key risks that we highlighted to you in the audit plan. And other than what I've highlighted about the property, plant and equipment material uncertainty, for those other risks around the financial statements, there isn't anything I would particularly draw your attention to. What I will just say, though, one other aspect of the pandemic is the impact on the council's financial position and the council's financial plans. And whilst the impact of the pandemic wasn't felt in 1920, it has more of an impact in 2021 and potentially the year after. We reconsidered the financial sustainability risk that we identified for value for money and considered how you were reflecting your situation in this new in these new times. And what we note there is that the financial challenge that you face is quite significant and quite severe. You do have a reasonable proportion of reserves that will see you through your 5-year medium-term financial plan, but your current plans do intend at this point to draw quite heavily on those reserves if other plans and other funding streams don't come to fruition. So there is a challenge ahead and some difficult decisions that will need to be taken. I'm also conscious that over the last couple of years, you have been exploring commercial opportunities, and the government has very recently made clear that borrowing from the Public Works Loan Board purely for investment properties that generate a return is not appropriate, and therefore your substantial capital programme over the coming years may need to be reconsidered in light of that very recent change. That's all I was planning to say, Chairman. I'm happy to pick up any questions that members may have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your summary. We have a question from Councillor John Barnes, please.
Yes, I want to hang something else on this item, Chairman, but clearly I think we do need to address the question which was hinted at by Grant Thornton, representative, in their last point, because on the whole what we've been doing is investing for regeneration, not simply for income. And also we're about to do housing. Now, obviously that does create dangers. You only have to look at what's happened at Croydon or at Nottingham to understand what those dangers are. So we will need, I think, as an audit committee, to take a long, hard look at these programmes. But nevertheless, I think they fall within the guidance from government, that because we've got another purpose, not simply income generation, I think they are legal and indeed desirable. What I wanted to hang on this, though, Chairman, is a question which is not really so much for our auditors, but for others, including yourself, which is the PSA consultation on the Redmond review, because Redmond has been looking at these issues, and I think we probably need to take a view on that, and it may have to be through you, Chairman, because it's not in front of us at this meeting. The other thing I wanted to get clear is by what date do we expect to clear our accounts? I recognise all the difficulties this year, and we are certainly not alone, but we presumably do have an end date for this process. I hope it's this side of Christmas.
Thank you very much. In relation to your first point, if you can just drop me a note, I will forward that on to the most appropriate officer to have a look at that in a little bit more depth. Darren, to pick up the second point.
Thank you, Chairman. For the second point as to when we hope to finish, we're certainly working on the basis of completing the audit this side of Christmas.
Which isn't very far away. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Thomas, please.
I'd just like to pick up 2 points, really. The first is that I noticed that there is a theme in a number of these reports, and that's about ICT governance. And this issue has been apparently going on since about 2013, 2014, where it's an issue around the way in which the council's IT systems would recover if they were kind of disturbed by some kind of emergency, such as a serious fire. And this apparently has been going on, as I say, for 6 or 7 years now, and doesn't appear to have been resolved. I wonder if we could hear a little bit more about that. That's my first question, please.
Yeah, if I can ask Robin to interject there, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Thomas is probably coming on to an item that we're going to be coming on to with Gary's.
It's on page 24, though, in this one as well.
Yeah, so I think maybe we can take it all at the same time with Gary's reports. But I can assure you that the way the council operates and the way it manages its IT is safe, and we have had experience of major outage last year, I think it was, where we actually practically could demonstrate the recovery of the council system. So I think to give members assurance that is something that we take very seriously, and Graham McCallum as the IT manager takes very, very seriously indeed. In terms of Councillor Barnes, I just wanted to pick up that on the PWLB changing lending policy. Yes, that's something that officers are going through. We will be reviewing the capital programme, but as he says, all that we've done so far has been within the district and has primarily had regeneration at the heart of why we're doing it. So we think we are compliant. There are some tests to go through in terms of the new guidance for lending policy, and we'll go through that against the capital programme, and then we'll report that back to members so that they can see if there's any changes in what we are planning to do. At the moment, we don't believe there is any change, because why we're doing the reasons why we're doing the things we are, but clearly we will go through that guidance. Also, we need to look at then alternative funding sources as well, not necessarily PWLB, because this is just a change in lending policy by the government, not necessarily outlawing investment in commercial activities if we choose to, as long as we comply with the relevant legislation that allows us to do so, particularly under the Local Exempt 2011, where we can invest into trading activities, commercial activities if we wish. So there is further work to do by the authority in terms of what its future strategy looks like. But I think for the moment, I'm fairly content that the capital programme is fine. But as I say, we will do that review and then report back to the members. Thank you, Chairman.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Councillor Thomas, do you just want to reply?
Well, on the first point, it does come up in various other sections of reports before us today. This bit about the ICT. And it does appear that there is an issue about who is in charge, if you like, of making sure that this actually is working. There was a period where nobody was responsible for it. There was another period where illness prevented progress in relation to this. And so it has dragged on quite a long time just to make that point. But the second one is a simple question. I noticed that it was said that we face this significant and severe economic challenge, and the question of the soundness of the reserves seemed to be bound up with the idea that we would be able to apply for certain sorts of grants, some funding streams. I just wondered, could we have a bit more detail about what those funding streams are, and what are the chances of those funding streams actually producing the results we want, and what are the chances of us not getting the funds we want? So a bit more information, just I'd be grateful for. And I just want to say too, I'm very aware that Council Office has been working their socks off during this period, and I think they've done a fantastic job in being able to produce the reports they've got for us.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah. So I'll respond to the Councillor Thomas's questions. I think in terms of future funding, this ultimately all ties into the funding review by government. Ultimately, as members may be aware, they've delayed that funding review for another year. So we will have a 1-year settlement for 21-22 financial year. And it looks like it's largely going to be rolling over where we've been so far. I think what my concern is about the risks of changes to the funding formula, particularly with regard to business rates and how that might be reset, where funds could be taken away from the authority and redistributed, particularly into adult social care services. So that's my real concern at the moment in terms of our future funding. But we are largely now reliant on our own income generation, council tax income, and a small share of the business rate income. So we are really masters of our own destiny in lots of ways going forward. And that's why it's important that the financial strategy that we've adopted on the 2nd of November, which talks about finding new income streams, but also finding efficiencies in how we do our business as well, is vitally important to the authority in balancing its budget over the next 5 years. I think what Darren is highlighting is that the financial forecast does look very difficult and will require a lot of effort by both officers and members to deliver those savings and that income. So it is quite a challenge for the authority, I think, just it's fair to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Robin. Okay, so we've got no further questions on the audit report from Grant Thornton. It is a report for noting, so if everyone is in agreement with that one. Yeah, lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so that one's been noted. Okay, so agenda item number 10 is the annual audit letter. However, this is going to be, it's not being reported at this meeting, and it will be reported at our next meeting. So we'll tag that onto the work programme, agenda item 15, when we get to it. So if we can now move on to agenda item number 11. So this is our statement of accounts, and if I can hand over to Robin again, please.
Thanks, Chairman. What I'll probably do is I'll probably hand over to Tony. I just wanted to pick up, though, that the statement as it stands in front of members today is largely what was presented to you in July. There's been a couple of minor changes in terms of notes within the accounts, but nothing to the core statement, so nothing to the comprehensive income expenditure or the balance sheet or cash flows. They all remain as is. And as Darren has picked up, is that there was a couple of errors in terms of our valuations of property assets. We're not proposing to change those now, but we'll pick that up probably in the 2021 accounts, and we'll revise those valuations then. But I think, let's say, generally, it is what we've got in front of members today is what we're predicting that will be signed off by the auditors at the end of their audit, and they conclude that. But if I can hand over to Tony, just to take members through a bit more of the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you, Chair. So the statement of accounts, they're required by statute, and as Darren has explained, we have complied with the accounting statements and accounting principles rather required by the Financial Reporting Council. And also, as Darren explained, there are some minor changes. There are still some more rather work around the audit that may result in minor but non-consequential changes to the accounts, but we're confident that we're there. and the accounts will receive the unqualified opinion, which is all very important to us as an organisation. A qualified set of accounts can have knock-on impacts for the organisation in terms of its credit status with third parties and so forth. So it really is, whilst it's quite an academic exercise or a technical accounting exercise, it's quite important to get this a set of unqualified accounts. I'm not going to go through in detail the numbers, Chair, because as you can see, the statements are something like 90 pages long or something like that. This report, it requests authority for Robin with yourself to make any changes to the accounts should we need them. Mm-hmm. So I'll just give you an overview of what's in there, and I'm quite happy to try and address any detailed questions. If I can't answer them this evening, then I'm happy to get back to members and try and answer them as soon as I can. So essentially, we have 5 sort of statements within the statement of the accounts, if you like. So we have the movement in reserves, and this shows the movement in year between usable and usable and non-usable reserves. So an example of usable reserves would be our earmark reserves that we've used and made quite frequent reference to when reporting the medium-term financial plan. So we can use those reserves to support revenue expenditure. Then we have unusable reserves, which are things like the revaluation reserve. So if we have a fixed asset and that is pushed up in value, shall we say, by a couple of £1 million, for example, that's good for the council because the council's net worth increases by 2 million, but it's not a reserve that we can use to go and fund or support expenditure, revenue or capital for that matter. We have the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and this shows the council's actual financial performance for the year. It's very different to how we report the monitoring in year. It's basically, it reflects private sector accounting practices and presents, if you like, a profit and loss account in a sense. And as I say, that's in accordance with the accounting standards set by the FRC. Moving on to the balance sheet, I think the balance sheet is quite an important document to understand it at a high level because it's fundamental to the council's strength, if you like, financial strength as an organisation. And the one thing I would draw, without going into too much detail on the numbers, if members look at the balance sheet, they'll see that the net asset position has improved by £15 million from last year, which is a good thing. I'll come on to that in a bit more detail, if I may, Chair, when I do the Treasury Management Report.
Yeah, thank you.
It also cross-refers quite nicely into a review that we had last week with our Treasury Management Specialist link. But just to contextualise it, Robin, I think, made reference just a few minutes ago to the change or the error on the fixed asset valuations. There was a couple of assets that had been valued incorrectly because the values had used the incorrect space area. But that error netted off at about £650,000, and we hold nearly £60 million of fixed assets. So we will put that right in 2021. But it fell below the materiality threshold that Grant Thornton used anyway. And yeah, just to put it in a bit of context for members, it wasn't it wasn't a huge thing. The cash flow statement is pretty much what it does on it does what it says on the tin. Really, it brings together in a single statement all the inflows and outflows of cash arising from our transactions with third parties. And then we have the collection fund income and expenditure account, and this is something that by statute we have to operate separately from our general fund, and it is purely for the collection of business rates and council tax, and also how we distribute that business rates and council tax to our preceptors as well, such as the county council and the fire authority, for example. So the accounts, as I say, they give members a snapshot. They're already out of date in a sense because it gives a snapshot as at the 31st of March 2020. But it gives an overall position of the authority's financial position, which we think is sound, notwithstanding the challenges that we meet. I was going to say a little bit about the challenges in terms of the impact of COVID, but that's already been covered by Darren and to a great extent by Robin as well. So I think it's it's fair to say, and that also is reflected in the audit findings, that our financial position at the end of March last year was strong. But notwithstanding that, we have a very difficult financial environment that we find ourselves in, and there are some major challenges ahead, as Robin has explained very briefly just now. There's some major challenges ahead. So unfortunately, there's no room for complacency, and I'm sure members understand that by now. We've had the discussion several times. So that's it from me, Chair. If there are any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Great, thank you very much, both Robin and Tony, for your summaries. Councillor Harmer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does state that the accounts to follow, and I notice we don't have the paperwork on agenda item 11. How are they going to follow?
It was attached to the next update. I think. Let's have a look.
Chairman, they emailed out to members on Friday.
I see. I didn't pick up on that. Thank you.
Sorry, I was going to say I've got it on mine. So yeah, okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we've got no further questions on our statement of accounts. So this one, it be resolved that the council's 2019 to 2020 statement of accounts be approved, and that delegated authority be granted to the Assistant Director Resources in consultation with the Chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee to make any minor non-consequential changes to the statement. Oh, just before we do that, I've got Councillor Thomas.
I'm sorry to be belated with this, but I suppose one of our jobs as councillors is to ask questions, isn't it? And sometimes, you know, that we have to sort of scrutinise things.
Of course.
So I'm curious about this. How did the mistake come about whereby we valued some of Freedom Leisure's assets incorrectly? How did that mistake come about, and how was it discovered? I'm just curious to know a bit more about how that happened, because it is quite a substantial sum of money, even though in comparison with the total holdings of the council, it's small. But I think the average member of the public would think that was quite a serious error.
Okay.
Can I have a bit more detail on that, please?
Yeah, Robin, are you able to pick that one up at all at this stage? Or
Sorry, Chair, I'm messing around with buttons and I'm making a mess of them. I'm afraid I can try and answer that if you want. If Robin wants.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, please.
The error, just to explain what the error was, the same. It was a typographical error almost, I guess, in that the floor space that was the floor space number that was given to the valuers, it was replicated, and it was an error as simple as that. I would still say that in the overall context of the accounts, 663,000 is still an immaterial error in the context of the valuation of the assets. But I can say no more than that. It was just a mistake. It happened. The auditors will pick these things up from time to time because it was on their test sample, if you like. So they don't go through every single asset and value them. They pick a few, and they picked on ones on these two where they spotted an error. I don't know how many they tested overall, but I think the percentage, where they found the error, material error, the percentage in terms of number of properties that they tested would still be very low as well. But as I say, mistakes happen, I'm afraid, and I apologise.
I appreciate it.
But I can't say much more than that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
I think it's important we don't talk about that as if it's insignificant. £653,000 is a massive amount of money, and so I think it really needs to be taken very seriously. If it was a typographical error, how did that come to be passed through? Why didn't somebody think to themselves, "My goodness me, that figure is much larger than we expected it to be"? It is quite a major error, and I think we should talk about it in those terms, actually, because I think if council taxpayers knew that we had made a wrong estimate through a typographical error of that size, I think the average member of the public would be quite exercised by that. So I just think it's a matter of attitude, a matter of how we present things, you know.
Chair, can I just add one more thing?
Yes, of course.
The error was it doesn't affect, just to give members some reassurance, it doesn't affect our cash position.
No.
And as I say, I'm not dismissing the error and trying to trivialise it, but yeah, we deal with millions and millions of pounds in doing the accounts every year. I think if you look in the audit findings as well, the auditors actually said that the standard of our working papers and the standard of our accounts were very high. So yeah, I think that also needs to be borne in mind.
Lovely, thank you very much. Robin, did you want to just comment on that finally?
Sorry, can I just comment before Robin?
Fair enough.
Yes, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I was looking at it. I mean, curious enough, it's an error in our favour because, of course, what we managed to do was to actually understate the value of the leisure centre, overstate the value of this Swinkle. What worries me much more is these are not really proper valuations. This is a desktop exercise where you look at a sort of building cost on a square footage that is supplied. So it's a very curious and rather artificial business that we're talking about. And obviously what's happened is not a valuer actually going to look at the things. We've supplied two figures and we've managed to reverse them when we put them forward. Hence, he's done his valuation on square meterage on two incorrect square meterages. That's how the error has arisen, and it's obviously a clerical error. It worries me, however, we're relying on valuations which are simply building costs. They're not really proper valuations.
Robin, did you want to pick that one up?
Chairman, yeah, I mean, the valuations are in accordance with RICS, as I understand. There's a number of different types of valuations as well. We have insurance valuations as well as the market, if you like, the market value valuations that we include in our balance sheet. But I just want to support Tony in the essence that there's no cash issue in terms of the authority. This is a valuation of an asset, and I can imagine that if you get two valuers in a room, you probably get two different values of those assets as well. So there is a degree that of subjectivity in terms of their own assessment of the valuations of assets that are included in our balance sheet. The only time you ever truly know the value of an asset is when you take it to market and you try to sell it at the end of the day. And therefore, whilst it's important for our balance sheet to understand the value of those assets, it's only a real issue for us is at the point that we come to sell that asset if we want to in the future, and then you try to sell it into the market based upon a valuation you have, and hopefully the market will pay that or pay more, hopefully. But clearly that is the only test at the end of the day that can guarantee the value of an asset correctly when you have to sell it. But at this point in time, obviously, we're not intending to sell any of our leisure centres or leisure pools, so that's not an issue. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so if I can have a proposer and a seconder for this statement of accounts report, please. Oh, I think Councillor Thomas is proposing. And a seconder.
I'm happy to second, Councillor Norton.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. Okay, so Julie, if we can do a roll call, please.
Okay, members, I'll call your names out in alphabetical order. If you can say for, against or abstain. So, Councillor John Barnes.
For.
Councillor Mrs Barnes.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Giawan.
For.
Councillor Mrs Kirby-Green. Councillor Mrs Kirby-Green. Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Norton.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
4.
That's carried, Chair.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. That is carried. Okay, so if we now move to agenda item 12. So that is our internal audit report to 30th of September. So if I can hand over to our audit manager, Gary.
Could I declare an interest again, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Under the business grant part that I have personal interest.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. This is my usual quarterly report to update members on the activity this time on the second quarter of 2020-21, progress made on implementing outstanding audit recommendations. The summary of audit activity: we have issued 7 reports in the second quarter of 2020-21. The executive summaries to which are reproduced in Appendix A, which is on page 26 onwards. These are joint waste contract central admin, first part of that audit, the ICT governance audit from last year, which we finished off in the second quarter this year, state's income of COVID risks, business support grants, also related to COVID, obviously, car park cash income, banking of pre-lockdown collections, SIL income, COVID risks, and risk management of COVID risks. Of COVID-19. So there was quite a few COVID-related stuff in there. All of these reports were given good or substantial assurance, which means that no areas of significant concern were found. However, many of these reviews were very limited in scope and has only focused on a few key risks, as we agreed on how the approach will be taken this year. The implementation of the audit recommendations. Progress on the outstanding audit recommendations has been followed up, and the current position is summarised in Appendix B, which is page 34. That's the usual statistics I produce each quarter. Let us look first at the long outstanding audit recommendations at the top of the page. These are labelled audit recommendations 2017-18 and 2018-19. Now, at the last September meeting, I reported 11 long outstanding recommendations. The Chief Executive has since completed a review of these, and the Assistant Director of Resources has agreed to accept the risk of taking no further action in 3 cases. These are documented in the report. However, all considered low or minimal risk because there are other compensating controls. So that's basically all there is on there. I'll take questions to those in a minute. A 4th long outstanding recommendation has since been implemented, so that leaves us with 7 long outstanding recommendations that's still to be resolved, and these are reported in Appendix C, which is page 35 onwards. The responses there are as supplied by the managers concerned, and they're the latest position I know. Now back to the bottom of Appendix B on page 34, we'll see that the progress and recommendations made in 2019-20, so last financial year, also continues to be slow. However, work on several of these recommendations is now nearing completion, and hopefully we'll see a few more of these resolved in the next quarter. Right, happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much for your summary. Councillor John Barnes.
Chairman, I rather share Councillor Thomas's view on ICT governance. It seems to me that we need to be assured of resilience and business continuity. I'm slightly puzzled it's called ICT governance, because really this is about business continuity, and it's absolutely essential that we know that this is secure. Given there is no plan, I'm not quite sure how we can be sure. I'm sure the officers know that everything is all right, but how does this committee actually know that everything is all right, that we have a business continuity plan that is deliverable? I don't feel we have the necessary assurance, and it's absolutely crucial that we are able to stay in business whatever happens. So it's really about business continuity, and I really do think we need a good report on this one. I'm not happy with the situation.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Yeah, so the report obviously that's come through from Audit has given an overall level of assurance as substantial. Robin, did you want to take this one forward, please?
Yes, Chairman. What probably sensible is for me and Graham McCallan, the IT manager, to work some information up for members just to give you that reassurance that you're seeking. Just to know, though, I can assure you that in a real practical sense, our business continuity works very well in our IT. We have experience of a real issue in June last year where we saw the actual practical application of how we brought systems back live as quickly as we could, and it was a serious outage in terms of our ability to deliver services and our overall strategy in terms of prioritisation of services that need to come back online work very well, systems coming back on very well, and we had the additional support of external consultants and external companies in terms of bringing those systems back online. So we have a very real practical example of how the council does react when that's happened. Also, I think, as you can see with the whole COVID-19 pandemic and the response to the IT department in bringing everybody up to speed in terms of being able to work from home and the controls they put in place with the implementation of Office 365 and obviously the meeting type remotely, I think we can be assured that the IT department are very much able to react to issues as they happen in a very practical and real way. I agree that our overall documentation needs to be better and updated for members so you can see and be assured of that. But as I say, in a very practical way, our IT department do respond very quickly to issues and are able to resolve those issues very well. So I think hopefully that can give some members assurance from me, but I clearly say, yeah, that we will do an update for members so you can actually see that in reality in terms of our plans and programs. Thank you.
Chairman, if I could just follow up, it might actually help instead of simply going back and looking at a plan which was devised. If we could have a paper on what we've learned and how the plan is going to be adjusted in the light of the outage and in the light of the COVID pandemic, we would kill two birds with one stone at that moment. And it would seem to me that's a more constructive approach.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so this report is for noting. Oh, Councillor Thomas just picked us to it.
I am reassured by what Robin says, but our job is to scrutinise, isn't it? And if we look under the section headed control objectives, security of data that is held securely and can be recovered in the event of a disaster is actually categorised as P, which is partially met. And further down the page under ICT continuity plan, it says the need to update and reissue the existing ICT continuity plan has been raised at every ICT governance audit since 2016 to 17, but only limited progress has been made so far to address this issue. So I think in the light of those two things being in writing for us, I think, yes, it would be a very good thing. And I think Robin's offer to actually give us some more detail on this would be, I think, very much appreciated.
Great.
Yeah, because it's our job to, even, you know, even though we've had this reassurance that it's all right, but I think our job as councillors is to make sure we are fully satisfied that it really is all right, as Councillor Barnes has already argued.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so the report, as I said, is for noting. So is everyone in agreement for the noting?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, that's noted. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 13. So that's our internal audit plan update. If I can hand over to Gary again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the quarterly plan for the last quarter of the year. I'm currently planning our audit work on a by quarter basis owing to the disruption caused by the pandemic. as you probably already know. The audit plan proposed for Q4 is shown in Appendix A, which is page 46. This quarter will see the continuation of the governance audits, which will need to be completed before the end of the financial year. The plan also allocates time for completion of a few other audit stroke consultancy activities, although it's not possible to specify all the work programme at this stage. This is because we need to take into consideration what situation the council's in at that time and availability of staff and things like that, and any changing risks. All progress against this new plan and amendments to it will of course be reported to members at the March meeting. No indicative plan is produced this time because I am hoping to be able to produce an annual plan for the next committee and go back to almost business as usual, if you like, if there's such a thing still exists. How practical this will be will of course depend how the COVID-19 crisis pans out over the next few months. So that's basically all I've got to say on this report, unless you've got any questions. Thank you.
Okay. So I've got no questions waiting for this one. We'll just give it a few seconds. Okay, so no questions for you, Gary, on this one. So, Julie, if we could have so first, if I can have a proposer and a seconder for this report, please.
Propose.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Thank you, Councillor Harmer. Okay, Julie, if we could do a roll call, please.
Okay, members, I'll call your names out in alphabetical order. If you can say for, against or abstain. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Mrs Barnes.
For.
Councillor Harmer.
For.
Councillor Giawan.
For.
Councillor Mrs Kirby Green. Councillor Mrs Kirby Green. Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Norton.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Julie. Okay, so if we can now move on to agenda item 14, so Treasury Management Update, and if I can hand over to Tony, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the Treasury Management Update for Q2 is not an awful lot of change from Q1, so I'll go through some of the highlights. I'll also try and contextualise it a bit for members, which they might find helpful in view of a couple of things that have happened since the report was written. Excuse me, sorry. So there's no change in the short-term investments, or very little change in the level of short-term investments. We've continued to hold money back because it's not all our money is one of the reasons, and also we are looking to fund increased capital expenditure, and we still expect that to be the case soon. Sorry, Chair. Now, we had a meeting with our advisors, our Treasury Management advisors last week, Link Asset, and they did support this approach because it was very low risk, and the returns on offer, if you put the money out on call, are very low, almost negligible. Having said that, Chair, we did have a meeting with yourself towards the end of last week. And we're trying, I've been in touch with Lloyds, and we're trying to negotiate something that will give us some kind of return, and they're going to come back to me on that. But I think you have to warn members that it's not going to produce thousands and thousands of pounds. It's going to be a very small return, but we're going to try to do that nonetheless. And we're also going to look into the other concern I think you also raised last week, Chair, which is around, I think the phrase you used was putting the eggs all in one basket, and that's basically reducing the risk. Although, again, I have to say that Lloyds are very low counterparty risk. But taking on board your comment, we're going to have a look into that as well. The forecast return on long-term investments, that's improved by about £50,000. We were at the end of last quarter forecasting about a £252,000 return against a budget of 400,000. And now we've upped that forecast to about 300,000. So property funds continue to represent quite a solid investment. And also, I think a point that I made in the last report was that the actual capital valuation of those investments, that's slowed down. The decline in the valuation has slowed down since Q1. But again, further lockdowns could push those figures into a more disadvantageous position for the organisation. So some guarded good news on that front. Borrowing portfolio remains unchanged. As I say, we haven't taken out any more borrowing since the last quarter. Cabinet did approve an increase in our authorised borrowing limits. I've drawn members' attention to that in paragraphs 16 and 17. The PWLB update, I think Robin and Darren from Grant Thornton mentioned that in their updates earlier. So the Debt Management Office, which is a sort of a subsidiary, if you like, for want of a better phrase, of the Treasury, have wiped a percentage point off of all interest rate levels at the moment. So that could have that makes borrowing even more cheaper and attractive, and could have a significant impact on the longer term financial picture. And we're working on that almost as we speak. So there's some guarded good news there. I won't repeat what Robin said, but he did mention that we feel that we're the right side of the government guidance, if you like, in terms of our purpose for borrowing that money from the PWLB. But just to give members some reassurance that we will be seeking legal opinion, an expert opinion, to make sure that we continue to fall the right side, if you like, and we are not stacking our capital programme with debt for yield capital projects, as they call it. So and since the last quarter, the property investment strategy activity has remained unchanged, again due to the pandemic, and in the report we've kept the rent right, whilst we haven't written off any rents at the moment, we've kept that level at £200,000. We think that's a prudent thing to do, especially with the continued uncertainty around lockdown. I put a little bit of a general economic outlook in there for members. It's still very uncertain. It's changed as well, but it's still very uncertain. There's plenty of external influences that could change the picture for better or for worse. It's a very volatile situation still. Lockdown, Brexit, the onset of new vaccines, they could all have varying different types of effect. Having had our meeting with the Link last week, they feel that Brexit is likely to have a negative outcome on the economy in at least the short term. And they did also say, and I think members may well be aware of this because I might mention this in the last report that I did, is that the UK has suffered the worst economic hit, if you like, of all the G7 nations. Their sort of outlook for the future is that interest rates are forecast to remain low. CPI inflation is likely to increase to about 2% by the end of next year, but then be held at that level. And again, this won't come as any surprise. Unfortunately, unemployment is likely to rise. They feel to about 9%. Quirkily enough, house prices have risen and they continue to rise. They've risen by about 6 to 7%. But we think that the end of the stamp duty holiday, which is the 31st of March 2021, will probably curtail that. But there's a little quirk in the trends that we've covered otherwise. So just a bit more about the meeting we had with Link last week. It was a helpful meeting. We meet with them every year. They analyse our capital financing requirement, our working capital and our reserves positions. And they concluded that Rother has a good and a strong balance sheet, which I think I alluded to in the statement of accounts report, and also concurs with what what Grant Thornton said about our current financial position. But they also stated that we would need to borrow soon if we wish to continue with our capital programme. Well, we already knew that. That was not really news to us. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on the report, Chair. And again, I'm happy to take any comments and questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your summary, Tony. Councillor John Barnes.
Yes, I was slightly surprised that our economic advisors aren't taking any account of the huge amount of quantitative easing that is going on. What is demonstrable, any economist will tell you, is that with this amount of quantitative easing, there is going to be a substantial inflation of assets and a widening of the gap with income. Actually, that's quite relevant to what we're proposing to do on the housing company. I'm not too worried, I must say, about the decline in the capital value of longer term investments, because clearly they are generating substantial and helpful income for us. And those values, I think, are almost certain to recover pretty fast in the light of what I've already said about quantitative easing. The point in paragraph 13, which I think bears some thinking about, is the line which says capital expenditure charged to revenue. Our problem is clearly going to be revenue, not capital, in the near future. And I think we do need to ask a question which I asked of Cabinet some time ago, which is why are we actually charging any capital expenditure to revenue at this moment of time? Obviously, it's sensible in normal times to charge the revenue cost of your capital to revenue, but we're not in normal times. And with revenue going to be taking a major hit next year, it seems to me it's a good moment for making sure you hang on to your long-term investments and you borrow to cover other things that you normally would finance out of revenue. It's not a good situation, but it's a topsy-turvy economic world at the moment. And clearly with Brexit around the corner, we are going to take a substantial hit, I think, in the short term, whatever happens in the medium term.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnes. Tony, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Barnes makes some very pertinent points there. The one thing I was going to come back on was again a pertinent point you made about using revenue to fund capital. It is something that we're reviewing. I can't get the numbers up on my screen because I've only got the one laptop to hand, I'm afraid, and I need my other screen. But I think I'm right in saying, and Robin might be able to help me out, is that in the medium-term financial plan, we've actually reduced the level of funding of capital from revenue to a much lower level. So yeah, Councillor Barnes' point is absolutely right, and it's something I think we have reviewed as part of the MTFP. I can confirm that by email if that helps. I just can't load so many spreadsheets on my screen, I'm afraid, Chair.
Sure.
But does that help, Councillor Barnes?
It does indeed, Tony. I haven't got the MTFP in front of me either, but it'd be interesting to see how much we've actually adjusted. I really think it's the level of quantitative easing is going to make an enormous impact in the short to medium term, and it's not going to be altogether helpful to anybody who's actually earning money. But people who hold assets, and we are a major asset holder, are actually going to benefit.
Councillor Mary Barnes.
Yeah, I just want to follow up something that I think I raised at scrutiny, which is a little concern about the interest that is coming back on a purchase which I believe is a large office block somewhere in Bexhill, which is only going to give us, as far as I can remember, something like 350,000 on a purchase of several million, which is an interest rate somewhere around about 0.5%. Now, I haven't got the figures with me because I haven't got my scrutiny agenda, but I would like just to hear about that, because it just does seem to be an absolutely dreadful rate of return.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, can you take that, Robin? I can.
Yeah, Chairman, if I can help.
Yes, please. Yeah, thank you. I was just reading your comment.
So through the property investment panel, obviously that proposal was taken and agreed, but I think the important thing is it's a long-term investment, and over the lifetime of the asset, it returns much more than our minimum benchmark of 2% return on average. That's because contained within the lease is rental uplift and the guaranteed rental uplift of between 2 and 4% per annum. So that's why overall, when you take out the longer term view on that investment, that the returns are actually reasonable and support the regeneration aspects of that project as well, which is about protecting somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 jobs. So there's more than the financial return aspect of that, but clearly it does return more than the minimum overall that the council set itself in terms of returns on assets.
If I may just come back with a comment on that. There has been obviously an enormous turnaround in the way people work as a result of COVID. And my concern really is, are we ever going to get back to a position where people are going to be sitting at desks in an office when most companies are realizing that it's much cheaper to have their employees sitting at home? I speak from experience because both my son and my grandson are working from home, and this is likely to carry on for some considerable time, and it might even become a permanent arrangement. I just worry about the wisdom of taking on something which is a step into the unknown at a very, very difficult time in our history. So I wish I shared your long-term appreciation of how the interest rate will go up. I wish I was so certain it will happen.
Chairman, I think that's why it's important that this is not a speculative investment or construction that the authority is doing. It ties in a major company for a long period of time with that lease. Therefore, the onus is on that company. If they no longer wish to use that building, it's on their onus in order to secure a future for it rather than ours. So in essence, they're tied in for a minimum, I think it is, of 20 years. So that gives us a level of security in terms of our revenue return on that asset. Plus also, given the way that the planning rules are going, obviously there are alternative uses to that building in the long term. So clearly we're looking at that. And I think another issue maybe is to consider that a lot of people are moving out of the centrals or not London or major cities and looking for a more pleasant environment to work within. And you could argue that North Bexhill is quite a pleasant environment to work within, and therefore may attract more businesses into this area because actually it's close to where people live. They don't have to travel so far into London, and therefore we might well find demand for good quality office accommodation may actually increase. We don't know that. That is speculation, but clearly there are alternatives to the London market, and I think that's having an offer that's of good quality will definitely make us an attractive place to come and work, I'd hope. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, thank you. I still maintain it's a brave move, but okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that one is an area that's going to need more discussion. When we get closer to actually finalising what we're looking to do. I think that Councillor Mary Barnes, though, those comments were raised at the panel in exactly the same way by several councillors, and I think the view at that point was that discussion had already been had with the proposed employer. In terms of what their longevity looks like. So, it's very much on the radar, I would certainly say. But yes, I think, I certainly do share the same concerns longer term around longevity about working from home. Brilliant. OK, thank you very much. So we've got no further questions. Treasury Management report again is for noting. So if everyone is in agreement with that, please nod or wave. Brilliant. Thank you very much. OK, so that one is noted. And our last agenda item is our work programme. So we now won't meet for 14 weeks, with the next meeting being on the 22nd of March. There's no standards reports scheduled, but I believe from the chairman's discussion we had last week, there will be a couple, potentially two, that will come to that meeting. And also the appointment of the audit independent person. So we're still looking at the post-recruitment process. Any other comments or anything that is missing on there from anyone's perspective? No? Okay, brilliant.
Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Barnes.
It's a question, really. It does seem rather odd that we shan't be signing off the audit until almost a year after the... I just wonder if we are legally obliged to do anything sooner than the 22nd of March. Genuine question. I really don't know.
Okay, in which case I will probably hand that one over to Tony, maybe.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
As I understand it, we have complied with the accounts and audit regulations in the way we've had to with the accounts being late. So we posted something on the website last week, on the 30th, I think it was, to say that the accounts were late and give reasons why they were late. I can't quote you what which part of the accounts and audit regulations that was. It's something with the word subsection in it and so forth. So we can confirm that as an organisation we have complied with our legal responsibilities in that respect. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. As long as the point's borne in mind, that's fine.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so anything else from anyone? No. Okay, so just before we sign off, just want to say a big thank you and well done to all the officers and our audit partners for all of their hard work. And again, to our members of the committee for your wonderful contributions as always. So if I don't see you before Christmas, have a very good Christmas. And we shall reconvene again in the new year. So thank you very much and good night, everyone. Meeting closed at 2012. Thank you.